Hello everyone, I hope all of you are well and healthy. I am Patricia from the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. And it is a great pleasure to be asked to give an eco-theological reflection to my fellow young people working for climate justice. For this reflection, let me start with a reading from the Bible. It is found at Isaiah chapter 24 verses 4 to 5. It says, "The earth dries up and withers. The world languishes and withers. The heavens languish together with the earth. The earth lies polluted under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed laws, violated statutes, broken the everlasting covenant." In the book of Isaiah, there is no concrete word for mercy. But I feel that the scripture that I just read is a loud cry for mercy about the things that are happening with God's creation, in our environment, and with us humans. The speaker is lamenting and in deep anguish. So when I read this, I immediately felt familiar with the scripture, in particular with how the speaker is connected with their environment. And today we find ourselves in a situation that I am sure, none of us ever imagined or asked for. We find ourselves in the middle of different global crises. And I could feel these frustrations. I could feel depression or agitated, or in this case, the speaker invites us to lament and cry for mercy. But first, who is crying for mercy? And second, to whom is the speaker crying for mercy? And how do we ask ourselves, or how do we ask for mercy in these times of crisis? My reflection will revolve in these three questions and upon the context that we are living in today. So the first question is, who is crying for mercy? And I think it is then appropriate to ask, why? Just as I said earlier, we are finding ourselves in the middle of different crises where it seems like everything is going wrong. So with this, how do we react? The world is facing climate change impacts at an accelerating rate. Rising global temperature, violent and extreme weather events, sea level rise, massive environmental degradation, and worsening poverty, and even this global pandemic. I live in the most disaster-prone region in the world, the Asia Pacific. And we are facing the harsh reality of the climate crisis. We are already in survival mode. I am not even talking about 5 or 10 years from now. I am talking about today. Now the world is suffering the COVID-19 pandemic. I know that we are together in this fight, but I am always wondering, in a country like mine, with our government and economy, how are we going to survive? In 2018, the Philippines was listed as the second most affected country by extreme weather events like typhoons, floods, and drought brought by climate change. We also ranked fourth among countries who are most prone to climate impacts. It looks like this. Our country recurrently experiences catastrophes and suffers disastrous climate change impacts over and over again. While we are still recovering from the previous disaster, another one will hit us. And the poorest and most marginalized people and sectors in the country are the ones who are suffering the most. So yes, we are in what it feels like a perpetual state of emergency. This climate emergency here does not only impact our environment, but it is very real, and it hits the core of humanity, food and life. My second point is, to whom should we cry for mercy? And to answer this, we must apply a critical and holistic approach in addressing climate change. We should always recognize the economic and environmental injustices at the backdrop of our climate crisis. Though poor nations have contributed the least to bring about the present climatic conditions, they are the first to bear its heaviest devastations. In our case, the Philippines only contributed less than 0.5% carbon emissions. But still, we are among the most affected. Our environments are gravely plundered, but we are not benefiting from it. And to make it even more dreadful, our environmental defenders and activists are under attack. They are being harassed, they receive death threats, they are being red tagged or being called terrorists, and some are even killed. So in this profit-oriented and greed-driven world, poor and exploited countries like ours bleed dry for the wealth of rich and industrialized countries. This is the context of social injustice that our cry for climate justice is found. And this brings me to my last point. We have already discussed the most affected of this crisis and its context, the systemic injustices that are currently prevailing. So now we understand that the cries for mercy are not just literal cries for mercy or help. When we are able to recognize the systemic roots and evils in the climate crisis, our cry for mercy becomes a cry for justice. It becomes resistance and protests. So how are we going to call for climate justice? We will do it collectively, with a strong hunger for accountability. Given our dreadful current climate situation, the duty to defend our environment from greed and destruction has become a collective and universal duty belonging to all humanity. And though this duty belongs to everyone, there is a particular and urgent call for the global youth to act. Because we may be the last generation who could actually act and address the roots of this climate emergency. The next decades, the next generations will be about survival and adaptation. So as I end my reflection, I invite everyone to take a look and be actively involved with the world around us. And I hope you will let this situation move you to urgently act. Doesn't this situation make your hearts burn? Thank you very much, and I hope you have a blessed day.